What's happening, guys? This is James Blum with MMOHuts.com, finally getting the chance to take a first look at Aura Kingdom, a new free-to-play anime MMORPG developed by X-Legend and published by Area Games, which also happens to be the same developer and publisher combo that brought us Eden Eternal and Grand Fantasia. So needless to say, these guys usually hold their own when it comes to anime MMOs. Luckily, the guys at Area Games hooked us up with early access so I can hop in and show you guys the game's core features and what sort of elements they've decided to implement in order to change this one up a bit. Alright, so I'm not going to start out with the character customization options, we'll get to that in a bit, but just to confirm and to calm your curiosity, this anime game is not gender restricted, so regardless of the 8 classes you can choose from, you can still choose to be male or female. But let's get straight into the meat and potatoes, the combat system and the interesting companion system this game is focused around. Now, from the looks of the gameplay in the trailers, it would seem like this game would have some sort of action combat system. Well, it actually doesn't, but even though a majority of the attacks in the game are point, click, make sure you're within range, reposition, line up and attack, there are a lot of skills in the game that have to be carefully positioned and set up correctly to pull off. Some attacks like this here will actually miss the target even if you think you've got them locked in, so to speak. Not only that, but it can miss and hit another enemy or multiple enemies, and that may or may not be good. So it actually puts some sort of cognitive thinking around your skill placement. And I've noticed that there are almost just as many skills that you have to position yourself as there are ones that automatically target. Some of these skills are projectile based, where they shoot in a straight line really slow. Other ones are AoE skills that telegraph on the ground and you've got to have your enemies in the right area for it to affect them. And a couple of them are the type of skills that transport you all the way to the enemy from a distance. Playing as the Grenadier, the 4th skill you get is a turret that you can deploy that deals damage to the enemy that you have targeted, and it's such a cool ability, and it's a nice add-on for this particular class that gives you a nice coverage area for straight-up damage and support. So hopefully you're starting to see that it's not really an action combat, but it's not really a traditional style combat either. And there's a little bit more to this. There are certain melee skills that are specifically set up to get you in to deal damage and then back out again to safety. You might have a skill, say, like the Duelist here, that consists of a series of flips, kicks, and slashes, but towards the end of the skill, the movement involved can get you out of the way from the retaliation attack. So I think it's safe to say that the combat is pretty fluid, especially seeing that you can channel skills while still on the move. So it's the type of combat system that classic MMORPG players can relate to, but at the same time it's complex enough later on that you can't really close your eyes and smash your hands into the keyboard hoping to spam skills over and over again. It takes a lot more thought process than just that. And along with this style of combat, the enemies, and especially boss monsters, display telegraphs on the grounds for their more powerful attacks that are easy to dodge despite the fact that there are no active dodge skills, but if they hit you, you definitely feel it. And it's not just look up and, oh wow, you took out half my health. It's more, if the boss looks like he can fling you across the stage, that's what typically happens. So the damage feedback when it comes to hits taken is something that grabbed my attention in this game, and the same thing goes for dealing damage to enemies. If I launch a missile at an enemy, you'd expect there to be some feedback. Well, in this case, there is. You hit a giant in the face, you stun him nicely and open him up for more attacks. So it works out good. But yeah, when it comes to skills, there are plenty to come by, and you get them rather fast in the game. So you start out with 2, you get another primary one at 4, then 8, 13, and so on, but once you get to level 40, you can pick up a secondary weapon that gives you access to a whole new set of skills and combination skills. Skills that allow you to use both of your weapons in the same attack move. The beta is capped at level 40, and I definitely didn't have time to get that far in the game and explore it, but it should make the late game combat pretty impressive. Not to mention, one of the really cool aspects of the skill tree in this game, called the Invoice Path, is that it gives players the ability to select from several skill options, passive as well as active, by starting in the center of a sort of web of skills. The best way to describe it is, it's a lot like Path of Exile's massive passive skill tree, just not as massive and complicated, but it's an awesome idea nonetheless. So you start out in the middle and you work your way towards the edge where you find more action skills, the same as you would if you were leveling, except unique to that route on the tree and according to what you're looking to do with the build of your class. And of course, as you're working towards the outer edge, you pick up several passives giving some decent attribute boosts in addition to the attribute points that you already gained just by leveling. So yeah, lots about skills and stuff, but if that isn't enough, I've got to mention the other core gameplay element, the Eidolons. These act as a companion, a pet, an errand boy, and sometimes even a mount. So when you start out in customization, you get to choose from 4, but at higher levels you get more, plus there are hundreds to collect for all you Pokemon fanatics out there, all with unique stats, growth, evolution, and skills. The idea when you're choosing one from the start is to kind of pick it like you would as if it was a co-subclass. You pick them based on their stats, so you might find one that has opposing stats to your class for an across-the-board approach in soloing, or you might pick one up based on skills that are almost the same as your class, so that way you can be nearly rock solid in some areas for grouping. It's really all up to you. I picked the Daring Dragon Grim because, well, I don't know, he looked like a Digimon should look. The nice way to look at it is, these guys fight by your side always, so in terms of skills, they're basically a whole nother skill bar to add to what you already have that can be set to attack with you or for you instead of controlling individually. Let me give you a nice example. See, I can come into this cave with my cannon and blow up some spiders on my own. But oops, I aggroed Skrillex over there, and he's gonna get his punch in there, but that's okay, I've got this. Plus, I've got a turret. That ought to mess him up. And notice that my Eidolon isn't attacking because I don't have him set to attack. And now that he's down, I can set my Eidolon skills to active by left-clicking on them, and now when I attack something, as you can see here, my Eidolon joins me. It's very helpful when taking on boss monsters knowing that you've got a turret as well as basically an AI player on your side. Not to mention, once you gain access to your Eidolon at level 10ish, you also gain an ultimate skill that you share with your Eidolon that looks pretty impressive and hits for a lot of damage. This is yet another thing that you gain more of over time, and for the most part your typical skills have pretty fast cooldowns with no mana-like resources to, keep you from casting them. The ultimate skill isn't that bad either. Its cooldown is around 120 seconds or so. In some cases, you might find it useful to specifically use your Eidolon to fight by actively choosing their skills individually. This lets you level up your Eidolon, increasing its attributes and overall stats, and there's also other ways to do that as well. For example, like I mentioned before, one feature with the Eidolons is that you can send them off as errand boys to collect special items that benefit them specifically. When you send them off, they're gone for about 10 minutes, but the items they bring back can range from experience orbs to boost their level, or specialty foods that up their stats quite a bit. The guys at Area Games were telling us that once in a while they'll bring you an item that it can only typically find in the cash shop, so that's an interesting incentive to, send out your Eidolon every chance you get. Keep in mind though, your Eidolon can't exceed your character's level, so don't think you can have your partner just, carry you through the game. It doesn't work that way. So these are just some of the basic things that the Eidolons can do. They're a neat feature, sort of like MMO Pets 2.0. They're not exactly groundbreaking, but I've got to say I like them as a fighting, item-gathering companion that they are. And I really like the fact that you can control them as much as you can, otherwise they might be slightly annoying. And so now that we touched on the core features of the game, let's go ahead and take a look at the class selection and customization. As I mentioned before, there are 8 classes to choose from currently. There are 3 melee classes, started with the Guardian, who has a sword and shield combo and is decently balanced between offense and defense. The Ravager, who has a huge axe that you can see here, great for dealing a lot of AoE damage, so it's a good choice when attacking multiple enemies, obviously. The Duelist, which was my first class of choice, they're very evasive and good in soloing some of the big boss monsters. Most of their attacks help them get back to a safe spot after the attack, which was like what I was talking about earlier. Then we have 2 classes specifically categorized as ranged, even though from here on out I feel, like the magic classes are ranged as well. But first off, we have the Gunslinger, which is almost the ranged version of the Duelist. They're quick and evasive, but at the same time do better with AoE attacks, even though they're just as squishy. The Grenadier, on the other hand, my second but now favorite class I've played, sports an awesome cannon, as you've already seen, with pretty decent stats across the board, and due to the arsenal that they have access to, like turrets and stuff, they can safely deal awesome damage from a distance and even help support and heal allies. Kinda reminds me of Chung from Elsword. And finally, you've got the 3 magic classes, the Bard, the Wizard, and the Sorcerer, all of which are capable of healing in a tough situation, but it's safe to say the Bard is the route to go if you want to focus on supporting and healing your allies. Now, our kingdom has 2 distinct glass cannon nukers, making players with this mindset have to decide between raw damage with the Wizard or balanced damage with a bit more utility as the Sorcerer. But seeing that you have a bit of control when it comes to shaping your class, all these classes are basically just templates to start out with. And of course, they've got a locked mystery class that hasn't been revealed yet, but my guess is that it's a hunter class with, traps. But who knows? That would be cool to see. As far as customization goes, once again, the classes are not gender restricted, and you've got several options for eyes, hairstyles, all of which have great looking anime style to them. Otherwise, there's not a lot of options, but at the same time, the options that you do have are actually pretty good in my opinion. And seeing that you've got the ability to preview some of the game's emotes right from the creation menu, it's safe to say that the social aspect of this game is a strong point. And so from there, the game starts you out in a scenario where the city is under attack and gets you acquainted with communicating with NPCs and little bits of combat. This sort of tutorial-ish stuff goes on for a bit longer, but isn't too bad. I'm glad the developers didn't feel that they needed to hold your hand through the first 10 levels of the game. Pretty much before level 2, you're on your own following the actual storyline, which starts immediately. And basically, you decide to help the higher town authorities find a missing boy, and everybody tends to notice how helpful you are, so they give you more and more work. It's not bad. Some of the quests have variety to them, one of which has you wake up sleeping lumberjacks, and another one has you gather ingredients for a potion that triggers the spirit to appear around you, which will eventually turn into your Eidolon around level 10. Now, the people in the starting town are taken back by you because just a couple of days earlier, another venturer came through who had a spirit attached to them, except they were causing death and destruction, and you're not. People who are attached to these spirits are determined as the envoy of Gaia, and their actions will shape the fate of this world. So I felt so far the game has a decent story that kept things interesting, and it helped to have the supporting quests. There are rarely any quests that have you go kill X number of baddies, but if it did, it was very fast, and you didn't really have to travel that far, which is nice. But speaking of travel, there's an awesome gliding element in the game, which I had a lot of fun with, and you get this ability around level 4. You have to press spacebar in order to jump to use it, and it goes for a good distance, and if you're high enough, you can keep it going several times before landing to cover massive distances really fast. Faster than any mount, that's for sure. Which is also something you get really early on in the game. The first mount you get is an ostrich, and the nice thing is, by default, it's set to mount as soon as you start traveling a long distance, like if you click on the map or use an NPC's name in the quest log. And of course later on you can find lots of mounts, some of which look pretty epic. This one here is gifted to me by a GM, but it's more than likely something you'd find in the cash shop, along with other costumes and dyes for costumes from what we can tell so far. At this point, it's hard to tell because the cash shop really isn't implemented yet. But seeing that the game isn't extremely PvP centric, I'm thinking you might have access to some powerful Eidolons and armor upgrades early on. But at the same time, Eidolons can exceed your character levels, so if that's the case, I'm not really sure how that's going to work out. So we'll just kind of push that off to the side for now. Other than that, guys, my overall experience with the game was actually better than I expected. I was excited about the game from the get-go, but actually more so once I started playing, and I actually under-anticipated it a little bit. Kind of wish I had a little bit more time to play it. The game definitely has some cool features coming from some experienced anime MMO developers, and I'd say their experience paid off, and it shows. I did seem to level rather fast and become super powerful compared to the monsters I was fighting at low level, but that also might just be beta speed leveling side effects, you know, who knows. Anyway guys, that's about all the cool features I can show off in this game within the short time frame that I had testing it out, but we've got tons of coverage at the MMOHETS game profile, so head over there for more information on Ara Kingdom. But for now, thanks for watching, and until next time guys, that's going to be it for me. I'm James Blonde. See you out there, gamers.